Welcome to online MOOC course in software engineering. In this lecture, we will discuss on the tools that are available for software development. So, the agenda is we will learn why tooling is important, the three important tools JAMA, Jira and IBM DOS, followed by a comparative study and selection of selecting which tool would be appropriate for the project type. So, why tooling is important? So, earlier while we learned the coding standards, we have learned something about IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment. So, which is actually a tool for implementation. So, where we have analyzed the uses. Instead of a basic text editor, by using these IDEs, we will be able to write the code in a very fast manner. So, it is trying to give us different color combinations to make us understand where the error is, and also it provides auto completion and many other features. So, likewise we do have tools for requirement analysis and for the entire software engineering process also. So, the main advantage of using the tools is what we are trying to understand. When we are handling the requirements in a manual way, there are many problems that can arise. Say for example, some requirements may get introduced during the life cycle, and those has to be entered in the manual way, and there could be some tasks associated with each and every requirements and a set of bugs. So, normally within a particular software we will be having several requirements. So, say R1, R2 to Rn, and each requirement will have a set of tasks. So, task also will start from 1 to n. So, for one single requirement we have multiple tasks. So, these tasks either they could be assigned as one module, or 2 or 3 tasks can be associated as one module. Okay. So, for each task, so assume for simplicity we will assume it is one function or one module. Okay. And you will be implementing that as in a programming language, and that could be associated with say bug 1. Okay. So, when you have everything like this in your hand in a manual way, say for example, if I have a bug number 1 or 2 and I have to identify to which requirement it is associated with, identifying that would be a very complex way and it is going to have many issues. So, there is a very poor bug tracking with respect to errors, and the traceability is very poor. So, what we mean by traceability? So, we know that a requirement will be divided into a set of tasks, and task will be associated with a module, and module will be implemented, and that will be associated with the test case, and that test case would say this as a bug. Okay. So, when I want to understand what this bug is, why this bug has arrived or to which requirement it is associated with, I have to trace back the entire life cycle and check this is with respect to R1. Okay. So, if you have everything in manual way in say Excel sheets or in plain papers, this is going to be a very complex area. Okay. And this may also delay the project, identifying those things and all. So, when you have tools will have a structure. So, something like this, you will be having several structures, and by the time when you click on bug 1 or 2 in our example, at the next click you can understand this is related to some requirements say 3 or 4. Okay. So, they also have automated coordination. So, when you do some change in one particular page, that will be having its reflection in all the areas where it is linked on. Okay. So, when there is duplication, there is some problems. So, that duplication will be handled by the tool itself, and it is trying to manage complexity, and it is also ensuring to the project to stay on track. So, many projects they miss the deadlines. Why? Because they cannot handle things properly. So, when you use these kind of tools, we can stay on time. So, that is a very important need for tools in software development. So, where all tools comes into picture? It starts from requirements. So, understanding the requirements and sorting it down. Okay, for that we can have tools. For design, we have learned many designing tools. So, we have tools to draw DFDs, use case diagrams. Many tools are available. It is commercial, sometimes some it is also free. And we have many implementation tools. So, we have learned several IDEs also, right. So, the importance of IDEs and the suits. Okay. And with respect to testing also, we have several tools. This lecture we are trying to understand the tools with respect to the requirements and managing the process. Okay. So, the rest of the tools we might have learned somewhere in between itself. So, we are now concentrating on requirements. So, now requirements management, these kind of tools are trying to focus on what has to be done. So, what is a requirement? Something that we need to do in order to complete that corresponding functionality, set of functionality, right. So, requirements just say what has to be done. So, that is what is requirements management. We have two tools in our agenda today. There are several tools, but these are taken for explanation. So, JAMA and IBM DOORS. So, IBM DOORS is much more heavy, and this is used for very big projects, very mission critical, time critical projects and all will use your IBM DOORS, and JAMA could be used for any projects, any kind of projects. And for project and issue managements, so project and issue management is like bug tracking and which module is assigned to which corresponding human resource and how it is going to be, in what stage it is, whether it is in progress or completed or bugs or whatever. So, it is trying to identify the end-to-end thing, end-to-end progress of that corresponding process. So, that is what is a project and issue management tool, and the example is Jira. So, this is given by Atlassian, a software company, and this is also widely used. So, there are many softwares that are trying to include, there are many organizations they are trying to include Jira in their platform to control or to make sure how the process is going on. So, we will look into JAMA. So, JAMA is a web-based requirements management tool for system and software specification. So, mainly it is only for the specification management. Okay, this is normally used in many software industries, or normal any industries could also be taken care. So, the clear focus is what a system should do. So, the key features. So, one is requirement creation and organization. So, each and every requirement from requirement 1 to say requirement 20, I will be trying to create the requirements and also organize them as some modules. Okay. So, that is the first one. Second one is end-to-end traceability. So, traceability we have learned in the prior slides. So, from the requirement to till where it is could be traced. So, say for example, you have identified a bug and you want to identify to which requirement it is linked to. You can do that in your JAMA. There is a possibility of version control. So, we have learned what we mean by version control. So, a set of modules put together as a working condition and it is given to a end user for production. So, that is version control, and if you want, it will have the set of all versions the project has come across. So, from that also we have learned several machine learning algorithms could be applied to identify what exactly pain points and go for software maintenance. and we have review and approval workflows. So workflow is something like the flow in which the data moves from one to end. So it could be review process or an approval process. So that is also available, and the impact analysis, whether the assigned job is done correctly or not, how far it is, everything could be identified. So these are the main key features with respect to JAMA, and where all it is used. So one is capturing the requirements. So this is the very foremost important use, capturing the requirements. So it will neatly identify all the requirements, sub requirements, everything, and how it has been related to the rest of the requirements. Second one is managing changes. So this is one point where the tools gives much importance than the prior ones. So when you have a manual process, new requirements or change in requirements is going to create the process cumbersome, but this tools will ease that process. So if there is a change in a requirement, and if you change in that corresponding point, it will reflect in all the other requirements which has been related with. So managing the changes. The third one is linking to test. So I will try to repeat the process again. So you have a certain set of requirements, and that requirements will be implemented. Obviously after the design it will be getting implemented. So this could be a module, okay, and each module will be having a test case, and this test case would be either passed or fail. If it fails, we can call that the software is in bug. So the requirement after some phases, after the design, after that process, assume that it gets implemented, and that it could be a partial implementation of this requirement or a full implementation of that requirement. To check whether this implementation is correct or not, you will be writing a test case. So what is a test case? An input to this implementation to identify whether the software is working as per the requirements. Okay, so you want to verify whether the implementation is correct or not. So to verify that, we will validate against the requirements. Okay, so this test case may either pass or fail. So if it fails, it means that there is some error inside your code, which is your bugs, right? So now when you have a test case, when you try to run the test case, we'll just run it in an order. So assume that for a module 1, we'll be having say 20 test cases. Okay, assume that you have say 20 modules. Just assume the exponential increase of the number of test cases. We will not be sure that to which requirement this test case has been written. Okay, so we will be just executing the test cases in order. Okay, so assume that a number, say for example test case 23 has failed. Okay, so if test case 23 has failed, we have to understand to which requirement it is been written for. Okay, so that identification is simple when you use your JAMA. There is a linking to the tests. Test here is representing your test cases. Okay, and it is also ensuring compliance with all the regulations that you want. Okay, so the main things are these three. So it is trying to capture the requirements. When there is change in requirements also, it is trying to provide the comfort, and third one is linking to the test. And by just looking into the software itself, we can very well see in fraction of time how much progress has been done with respect to these requirements, and how much test cases has been passed, failed, or in progress. So we'll just look at the workflow. So the first step is creating the project. So anything, we have to just create a project, add the requirements. So based on the project that we have assigned, we will be having a certain set of requirements. Everything has to be added sequentially, right? So that is the second step. The third step is defining the attributes. So we have to say in what aspect these requirements has to be checked for. So those are the attributes. Fourth one is linking the requirements. So this is what I was trying to say earlier. If you remember, we have learned something called as a traceability matrix. So you will be having requirements 1 to n on the top and requirements 1 to n on the left. Okay, so this is going to be a matrix like structure. Okay, so if I have a tick mark, or sometimes there will be a percentage. For clarity or simplicity, I will just have a tick mark. Okay, so what I am trying to understand here is that, so if it is R1 and this is R3, okay, for our example I have just taken 4 requirements. Okay, on the top we have R1, R2, R3 and R4, and on the left we have R1, R2, R3 and R4. So there is a checkpoint in this position, right? So what it says is, when you change R1, there is a dependency in R2 and you have to make sure that that is also getting updated, or you have to check whether there is any issue. Similarly, R3 is having some dependency with respect to R1 and R2 is having some dependency with R3. So just an example. So we are trying to link the requirements to make sure when there is a change in requirement at the later point of time, if you do some implementation changes, you have to correspondingly check whether it is having any problem in those requirements, those set of implementations also. So that is what is linking the requirements. After that, we have to review everything, because people who doesn't have any knowledge also can add the requirement, but this review and approve should be done by the high level, technical level people, so that they review all the requirements and check whether the attributes are defined properly and whether the requirements are linked properly, and then they will approve the workflow. And the final step is that after it has been approved, it is in production. It is like the software life cycle has begun. So after beginning the software life cycle also, each and every change has to be correspondingly updated in the JAMA software. So at any point of time, if you want to know what set of requirements have been completed or which is all in progress, which are yet to start, everything can be analyzed and the impact could be identified. So this is a continual process. So now we will look into Jira. So as I said, compared to JAMA, which is just a requirement management tool, Jira is going to be a project management and issue tracking tool. So initially it was like to check the bugs which is available, and it is for bug tracking from the initiation of the bug, whether it has been correctly identified. Meaning when there is when a test case fails, we know that there is a problem in that corresponding code. So identification of the bug itself is difficult. You have to go to the code and check using some primitives like backtracking or giving inputs and checking like that, and to identify the location of the code. Okay. So after identifying the bug, obviously we have to give some solution, and tracking from the start to end of that bug is called as your bug tracking. So that was the initial starting of these tools, but later it had the entire project management and issue tracking tool. So the main focus, like what we have learned in JAMA, which is what, here it is how. So how exactly the work is being done. So the key features here is that there are 3 issue types. So one is story, task and bugs. So stories, in agile terms we call this as user stories. So stories is nothing but the similar to your requirements. In agile we call that as story because it is more like you are associated to the end user, where they can just say what they want as a story. Okay, so a requirement which is called as stories or user stories will be segregated into a set of tasks, and the task may have some bugs. Okay, so this is the idea. So basically these are the types. There are some boards which we call in agile development, they call this as Kanban boards or Scrum. So Kanban boards are something like our sticky notes, where it will be having several colors. So the each and every color is associated with a particular domain. Say for example, these are bugs, these are requirement, these are design things. Likewise, they denote a particular functionality and to which person it is associated with, in which stage the corresponding feature is in. So likewise, there will be a board. Okay, so I have figure in the later part of the slide, I will show that. And there are some Scrum boards also. So Scrum is a meeting, it is a procedure wherein a simple functionality will be taken for implementation, and they do that in a sprint. Okay, so sprint is a tooling. Okay, so it comes under your planning. So sprint management can also be done in your Jira. So it also provides custom workflows and dashboards with which we can track the progress and find the team's performance. Okay, so these are the common uses for Jira. So one is managing the development task. So unless you're Jama, this also takes care of your development task. So taking each and every task. So now we have user stories and we have several tasks. Okay, task 1, 2, 3, we will be having several tasks, and this every one single task will be associated to a team. Okay, so in which stage a task is in, okay, can be managed. That is the first use. The second one is primitive use, tracking the bugs. So this will be associated, each task will be having several bugs, and that could also be tracked to which task it belongs to and to which requirements it belongs to. Planning sprint. So when we will plan a sprint, when you have a task in hand and that is not yet started implementing. Okay, so in that case you can also plan for a sprint. Monitoring the team progress. So team progress can be monitored when the sprint is in action. So you have started developing sprint, a work which could be done in a small amount of time, but that work has to be independent and it should work perfectly. So while the sprint is in progress, you can also monitor in what way the team is progressing on. And obviously it is supporting Agile and DevOps. So the workflow. So like we have learned for Jama, this is the workflow for Jira. So you have to create a project, add the issues. Issues could be the 3 we have learned in the previous slide. So it could be user story, task or bug. So if it is user stories, it will be segregated to various tasks, and tasks will have subtasks and bugs will be associated to tasks or subtasks basically. So add the issues. So if it is any kind, say user story or bug or task, it should be associated to a person. So that is what is assigning. So assigning a team or an individual to a task or to an issue. So that is what is assigning. So if you remember earlier, we have learned something called as pair programming. So what we mean by pair programming in Agile, you will be having 2 people, one would be having much expertise and one will be a novice user. So they work as a team so that the expert will give knowledge transition to the novice. And next is planning for sprints. So once the team or an individual has been assigned, they have to start working, and that comes under sprint. So when the sprint gets started, the work has been initiated, so that you have to track the progress, and once the progress is fine, you close the sprint and identify any issues, and if there is any issues, you have to clear them and you have to close the issues. So this is what is the Jira workflow. So if you look into the workflow, you can understand from the initial, from the user story till the issues have been identified and cleared, it works the entire software process. Okay, so this is how it differs from the other tools. Okay, so there we don't have any assignments or sprint related details or tracking and all. So that is only with requirements and test cases. So third one is IBM DOORS. So this is also a requirement management tool, but how it differs from JAMA is that it is for very large systems. Okay, so particularly it is for very large system and safety critical systems like defense, aerospace and rail. Okay, where when you miss one requirement, it may be very much hazardous or it is very important for any general public. Those kind of a projects will be using IBM DOORS to look into the requirements management. So the only main difference is that strict requirement control is the core focus. So the key features. So how the strictness comes into picture? Formal documentation 1. So the requirements is treated as hierarchical objects. So there should not be any contradicting requirements or anything that is not in a good functionality. Second is strong traceability. So even though the other two gives traceability in their workflow, this gives very strong traceability by accessing the modules with their baselines. So what we mean by baseline? The basic level of software that works on. Okay, normally it adds on top of the baselines and gives you various versions. So all the traceability across the baselines and the modules will be given here. So baselines and versioning is another key feature. It is trying to give you immutable snapshot for milestones. So what we mean by a milestone? You start with the software development and you move forward. Okay, so in between you will be having several milestones, milestone 1, milestone 2, milestone 3. So it means that once you have reached the milestone, whatever you have developed in that milestone will not have any impact even though you have some errors in the next phase. So that is what is a milestone. So some they will give this as a version 1. You have done a particular functionality that is working correctly. So that could be taken as a milestone. The first milestone is normally called as your baseline. So the common uses for IBM DOORS, it is mainly for complex systems. So managing voluminous system requirements for large scale projects. So mission critical projects, as we have learned. The long term management, handling requirement evolution and maintenance over many years. So this is a very important aspect, because if it is a very big project, it may not close at short time. So you should need some time, say in years, to make sure if there is a change in requirements that could be handled. So third one is compliance. So it is supporting certification standards like these three. Okay, and it also provides complete traceability for contractual obligations. So it stands for auditability also. So again, the workflow. So just like the other two, this also has procedure. So first one is to create the DOORS module for each specification document. So for each specification document, you have to create a DOOR. So enter the requirements as distinct objects and with unique IDs. So each requirement will be treated as objects, okay, and it will be having a unique ID. And after that, you have to set the attributes, like what could be the safety level, what is the verification method. Likewise, you have to set the attributes for each and every requirements. The fourth one is linking, much like our previous thing. So the requirements has to be linked. Why we are linking? We have to identify the traceability. So that is why we are trying to link the requirements. And fifth one is that we have to create the baseline to capture the milestone versions. So you will be having multiple versions. So first version is which we call it as baseline. So what is the baseline? Baseline, and how many versions you are going to move on. Okay, so that could be given in the fifth one. And the sixth is generating reports for traceability and compliance to go for auditability. So this is very important. We are trying to compare in 4 different aspects. What is the main focus? Support for agility, traceability and complexity. So first we will take JAMA. As we have understood, it is only for requirements management. So the main focus is only for requirement. And JIRA, it is for the process, the task that is associated with the process and the issues. So issue tracking is also taken care. And IBM DOORS is also for requirements, but one thing is that it is going to give you long term project support, and it is used for multiple requirements, very complex requirements. Agile support, it is limited in JAMA, but it is very strong in JIRA, and it is weak in IBM DOORS. So support for agility is not given in JAMA or IBM DOORS in much when compared to JIRA. And to speak about the traceability, JAMA gives you strong traceability. So the requirements to requirements mapping is done, but in JIRA it is limited. So in JIRA it is mainly concentrating on the flow, which task is associated to which team or an individual and how well that task is in progress. So that kind of information is only given, but traceability is not given that much. So it is limited. In IBM DOORS it is very strong. We have objects and IDs with which we can get much clear information. And to speak about the complexity, the usage of these tools, complexity is medium with respect to JAMA, and JIRA is low to medium, and IBM DOORS is high. Okay, and as we know, the tools are commercial, and for trial purpose you can very well download and use it for free for some amount of time. So I would ask you to download these 3 tools and check for how it is working. Okay, so it is all the features are free for a limited amount of time. You can just try it out for clarity. Okay, so here another important thing from this slide is that if you want a very good traceability, and if it is a small, not a very big time crucial or mission critical system, you can very well go for JAMA. Okay, and if you want agile support, you can go for JIRA, and if it is a very big system and you want to handle multiple requirements and it is going to change, then you can go for IBM DOORS. So the same thing, when to use which tool. So JIRA is for agile projects. Okay, so when it is needing efficient task and bug tracking, you can go for JIRA. If it is requirement heavy software and it needs traceability, and if it is a simple, fairly simple, not a very complex software, you can go for JAMA. For safety critical and regulated systems where compliance is the key, you want to have compliance in each and every aspects, obviously IBM DOORS is the best suitable tool. So we will take an example scenario, say online shopping system. So where we can identify that the tools complements the practice. So requirements and compliance. So when you have high level specs, regulations and user needs, and they could be managed in JAMA or DOORS. And the same software during the execution and tracking, say to identify what are the sprint tasks, what are the user stories, bugs, those could be tracked in your JIRA. So what you can understand from here is that it is not that you can use them in idle. It is not single handed tool. You can very well have a integration with these tools to manage the requirements and other things. You can have JAMA, and to go for how the progress is in, how the execution and tracking, you can go for Jira, and you can integrate these two in the software and you have a very better view of the system. Okay, so you can there are many tools, many organizations, they are using the tools in parallel. They have integrated and they are using both. Not only Jira and JAMA, there are some other tools similar to this. You can also explore those tools also. So the advantages and limitations. So Jira is easy and flexible, but the limitation is that it is having very limited requirement traceability. When we come to JAMA, it has strong traceability, but there is a very limited learning curve. So traceability alone is okay, but only with requirements management we cannot go for further in identifying what exactly happens in that software. But in DOS, the pros, the advantage is that it is having a very good control, but the disadvantage is that we need a steep learning curve. So we have to learn many aspects within the tool itself to go deep and identifying how it is actually working. So as a summary, we have learned why tools are important, and we have learned these three tools: Jira, which is trying to manage the work execution, JAMA, managing the requirements with traceability, and DOORS, maintaining or managing the critical system requirements. So understanding the each tools is important to build an integrated tool chain both for agility and compliance. Thank you.